Bill Browder is the CEO of Hermitage Capital Management, a prominent Kremlin critic. He joins me now. Bill, I believe we see you now. You are not frozen. Wonderful. Let me get your thoughts first, Bill, on the meeting between President Putin and President Biden. Did you see any indication there, Bill, of a change of heart from President Putin?
No, none whatsoever. I mean, basically, he offered nothing in this meeting. He didn't offer to, he didn't say, I'm going to hand back American hostages. He didn't say, I'm going to release Alexei Navalny. He didn't say, I'm going to pull my troops out of eastern Ukraine. He didn't say he would stop bombing civilians in Syria. He didn't promise he would stop cheating in international sports. I mean, basically, for him, this was a huge success. He got to sit on the main stage with the most important person in the world, and will carry on doing all of the malicious things that he's done, which has caused so much trouble for everyone in the world.
We'll talk about what the relation might look like. But, from what you're saying to me is that he's going to go home, he's on his way home, and he's going to sell this as a win.
It's a big win. Basically, he shouldn't have been given that stage in the first place. He's done nothing to deserve the kind of respect and recognition that he got sitting on the stage with the most powerful man in the free world. It looked like he was on par with President Biden when he's not. He's running a kleptocracy with a tiny economy, and all he does is go around hacking elections, messing up pipelines and doing all this type of stuff. And he doesn't deserve this. He doesn't deserve the gravitas that this thing gave him.
You are not alone. Bear with me, Bill. Garry Kasparov spoke to CNN. This is what he said in relation just ahead of this meeting. Take a listen.
Putin already got what he wanted, a summit. He might get more, of course, but the main exchange has already happened. President Biden gave the credibility of the United States to a brutal dictator. Let's not forget, Biden called Putin a killer, and rightly so. And the president of the United States having a summit with a killer who attacked his country, the United States, on multiple occasions. It's only a sign of weakness. And it doesn't matter what Biden or the Democrats think about it. It's what Putin and his mafia and their cronies around the world think that matters.
And so pretty much, Bill, is along the lines of what you're saying to me. What he's giving him is, by having this summit is credibility.
Indeed, it's completely and absolutely, it was the wrong thing to do. It made no sense. And Putin is the only person walking away with a win from this whole thing. If we wanted to express our displeasure with the things that Putin is doing, we didn't need to do it with all this pomp and glory. We could have, United States or NATO or any other group of people could have issued a press release saying, here are the red lines you cannot cross, and if you do, there'll be consequences. It was not necessary to have this summit.
But what is clear from President Biden is that for him it was important to have that face-to-face meeting, and he even said at the press conference that, he's not confident in the behavior of President Putin. So what can we expect from this relationship, given what we've heard today, given the fact that President Putin pretty much dodged every single challenge, from cyber attacks, from Navalny, Ukraine? What can we expect?
You can expect more of the same, and a lot more of the same. Vladimir Putin is not doing this because of anything we're doing. In order for him to stay in power, he needs an enemy. He needs the United States to be his enemy. He needs the West to be his enemy, because he doesn't want his people to be mad at him. He wants them to be mad at someone outside of the country. And so as his own situation becomes more tenuous, as the economy suffers, he's going to be doing more of this stuff. The only thing that Vladimir Putin understands is raw, hard power and consequences. And until we have the guts to impose them, he will continue to do more of the same.
When I was listening to President Biden, he said that he came to the meeting prepared. He said he read autobiographies about Putin. And he said something that struck me, I don't know if you heard him as well say this, that he touched on that, Putin's credibility on the world stage, trying to play with some of the way he thinks. He said Biden said to him that Russia wants to be relevant, it's being squeezed by China, he cares about his standing in the world. I mean, as he tries to get into his head, Bill, does that work? Has that ever worked with Putin?
And it's never worked with Putin. If you go back 20 years, George Bush and his first summit looked Putin in the eye and saw his soul. President Obama then wanted to reset relations. President Trump said, "I want Putin to be my buddy," and now you've got this. It's just same version of it's all the same thing, which is you have a new president, and Putin laughs at this. He knows that in our democratic system, every 4 or every 8 years, some new guy will come along and want to try to look inside his mind, look inside his soul, or whatever, and then convince him to behave himself, and it never ever works. And so I think it was foolhardy to go into this situation. I think the United States got nothing out of it, and it was a mistake from start to finish.
Well, President Biden definitely seemed like he had a spring in his step. I didn't think he expected anything to come out of it per se, but he clearly got the message across. He told them what the red lines were. But the question then becomes, what is the metric for success? Where does this go?
Well, the only metric for success is communicating to Putin that terrible things will happen if he continues to send his cyber attackers into the United States, if he continues to assassinate people on foreign soil, if he continues to invade foreign countries. And the only way to convince him of that is not by having summits, is by creating horrible consequences when he does these things. And so far, that hasn't happened. And until it happens, Putin will do more of the same. He can have as many springs in his step as he wants. But Putin is a thug. He's an international mafia boss running a country, and he only understands hard consequences. And until those hard consequences are imposed, he's going to continue to do these bad things.
He was, this is Putin's 5th meeting with the US president. You know him better than any of us, Bill. Were you surprised at, the way he spoke of President Biden and just how confident he was? Were you surprised at all by some of the compliments he gave to President Biden?
Well, these are sort of backhanded compliments. On one hand, he's complimenting him, and on the other hand, he was trying to do everything possible to make sure that Biden wasn't elected. Putin is a professional secret policeman who extracts people's nails out of their fingers to get confessions. And so for him to make comments, for him to smile, for him to bluff, this is what he does on a day-to-day basis through his whole career. And so, yes, he will flatter Biden, he will make him seem like they're buddies, whatever. But in the end, this is a man who would kill somebody with his bare fingers if that's what it took for him to get ahead. That's the kind of man Vladimir Putin is.
Very important perspective, Bill, that you bring to the show, of course, and very important voice, of course, on this from the Russian side. Really appreciate it. Bill Browder for us. We'll have much more after a very short